it is the nature of the learning experience that's vital. And going back to the diplomas again, diplomas were one of the first qualifications to begin to dictate, in a good way, that pedagogical experience that young people should experience. What we've lacked in the past with things like the equivalents of the old BTEC qualifications, which now come back to the fore, is if we can look at BTEC as the accreditation, but put a really vibrant pedagogical experience in place, we're back to diplomas with a currency. So it doesn't matter how it's accredited, it's that experience and the involvement of professionals from outside school, is that connectedness with the real world which young people value. One of the criticisms of school activity is very often it's teachers who are leading it, often based upon their teacher training programme. Whereas as soon as you start involving professionals from the outside world, you've got the skill of the teacher in facilitating the learning, but bringing in those professionals and together jointly planning episodes of learning.
No one really has a good word for what we might think of as traditional careers education, careers advice. Very hard to find anyone that tells a good story about it.
Yeah.
It gets a shocking press in terms of what happens in schools, be it from the government, industry, education, wherever. And I guess that's largely on the basis of personal experiences. But in a sense, I think it's a very, I mean, I'm talking something as an outsider, not an insider. It's viewed in a very, very old-fashioned way. It's viewed as a formal part of education. It was hurt very badly by not going into the national curriculum. It is statutory, but it's not in the national curriculum. That gives it a really difficult starting point. And then in an arena where money is short, effectively it's largely available to those who are in danger of dropping out of the bottom of the system and becoming unemployed. And that's where most of the provision goes. Except potentially in private schools, where there is quite good provision to the higher echelons as well. In reality, careers education, if you want to call it that, careers advice, there's a smattering of it goes for everybody, but anything personalised pretty much goes. There's a thin layer at the top and there's a layer at the bottom in terms of who gets it, and the bulk of people really get nothing at all. Equally, the other side that's probably very difficult in school is that the sort of people who become careers teachers, careers advisors and so on, largely were humanities teachers, and probably they've ended up as careers teachers because actually they weren't particularly good at being humanities teachers. If they'd been really good humanities teachers, they'd probably been heads of department and that kind of thing. Actually, so it's a rather downtrodden, sad, I mean I generalise, but...
That's a good point though.
Yeah. Therefore, how are they going to get a better idea of a future world of work, or even the current world of work, when A, they come from a teaching background, and B, they're not let out of school for training? Some of the stuff we've been exploring is how do you break out of that, and how do you get young people to think about their careers outside formal education? And I would argue that that's a real missed opportunity in many places. If you go into, and just on the STEM side for a second, if you go into the Science Museum, which is classically the place in London where you might take your kids to excite them about science, particularly when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever it is, that's sort of maybe 12. I would challenge you in the Science Museum to find the place anywhere in it, or a piece of paper that says, so you want to be a scientist. There isn't one. Not a single one. Now, my argument would be, surely the best place to get people to start thinking about their futures and so on is when they're excited about something, as opposed to being when they're in school, which is where you do learning.
So I was thinking there's a key word here, isn't there, that sort of just sprung into my mind, and I remember it from when I was at school in the 70s, that it was called career opportunities. And opportunity, it seems to be the history of my sort of engagement with teaching design, for example, and now innovation, is about opportunity mapping rather than problem solving. We're designers, not engineers, so we're about opportunity mapping. And I'm wondering then whether, and this maybe is something that we're tasked to do here or to begin thinking about, is, what are the opportunities for future careers? And if we talk to younger students at schools about opportunities rather than solutions, then what is the difference in our sort of discursive relationships?
I think graduating at 21 actually and going to university at 18, looking back now, is very young. At 21 coming out and thinking, oh right, I've got to get a job. And you look at things like graduate training schemes and the amount of people that apply for graduate training schemes, because you're so institutionalised, you're used to being told you go from here to here to here. And when you get to here, you go, where do I get? Someone tell me where to go now.
Yeah.
And so people naturally go into a PGCE or a graduate training scheme because that's what you've been told to do. And yet actually, if we empowered young people from the offset and gave them lots of experience themselves, then they could draw from their own experience and then make their own decisions. I used to work for Coventry University, and when HEFCE put the cap on the number of undergraduate students, that was actually a marketing thing, which is actually quite beneficial for what we're talking about. It was, how do we get students in who are under the radar of HEFCE, who aren't funded by them? And they offered a degree which was called a flex degree, which was 4 years rather than 3 years, and you did that degree alongside working and you self-funded that degree. But actually, is that too late? I think we need to be doing something earlier than that, earlier than your degree. This needs to be something that's brought into schools. I don't think 2 weeks work placement in year 10 that I did in a nursery school in Coventry did me any good. Do we need to incorporate something into the curriculum whereby you go out to work, even if it's only like, an hour on a Friday afternoon that you go and work at a local organisation.
But for a purpose.
How young are you talking?
I think you could start that from about 14. There's no reason why not.
I mean, that's been a big focus on the way in which learning has moved over the last probably 5-8 years. That the focus is on the skills and competences that you need to develop, and they are lifelong skills and competences, with the subject knowledge being linked to it, but not the key focus. What we've got to try and persuade whatever government, because it was happening with the previous government, giving them confidence that these different routes will allow young people to show evidence of achievement and attainment by maybe new metrics, and it's giving them confidence that if you do this, you will have young people better able to progress into the workforce and into higher education, which we know is true. But sadly, the metrics are so limited that all they are looking at are the old-fashioned GCSE type metrics. And we've got to convince them of that somehow.
Technologically mediated presences are allowing for a multiple and dynamic sense of self, and that these are easy to generate. Therefore, I can be a creative director because I've said that, and I can go to Victoria Station, pay £3 and get a card which says that I am. Yeah. So I can also be a designer, and all of those other things. And I'm wondering whether this idea of identities or selves being fluid that we're getting from a sort of technologically mediated existence is coming back into the offline world in exactly these sorts of ways.
Oh, I wanted to talk about the word generalist. Do you remember there used to be this thing called a generalist? I mean, what's happened to that? Is that just gone?
No, it's coming back.
It's coming back. So
you've got UCL doing that.
Right.
Bringing in, UCL is starting a new, I think it's an undergraduate course, but I can't remember, but a new course where you can pick across all of the provision that they have and generate your own studies, I suppose.
How do we actually get young people to have the language at their fingertips to talk to their parents and to have that kind of conversation at home where they initiate it possibly, but with the kind of language that their parents can start to come in on?
I think
that's also a way in which careers advisors could get involved, playing that role that you play with your daughter, having those sort of conversations.
But I think we should anticipate that they are never going to have a much bigger role than they do now. If anything, it will be smaller. I mean,
Yes.
they are a long way down the path. So
It
effectively,
has to work in a different way.
and for sure, there are people in government who are very interested in electronic alternatives
Yes.
to
Yeah.
careers advisors, if
Yes.
you like.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that, I mean, Sophie was talking a lot about ICOD earlier on.
Yeah.
That is the sort of tool you can use, because actually what she didn't really say about it is that the whole point of ICOD is it's not about what the careers are, it's about the journeys that people made. And
Absolutely.
that's the
Yeah.
key part. And so somebody, and we've had one or two very nice little case studies out of it, where one that stays in my mind was, I think, a fairly bright Asian child, teenager, had a passion for theatre. His parents said, no, that's not you can't have a job and that's not a proper job. You know, you've got to go and work in a profession or whatever. And he was able to take them to the screen and say, look, here are people with genuine careers doing technical things
Yeah.
in a theatre.
See, that's great. That's great.
That is
Yeah.
evidence.